Catch Outdoors. I'm your host, Cap Rob Nogues. This podcast is centered around the great outdoors, especially down this way in the most southern regions of the continental U.S., the fabulous Florida Keys. Catch Outdoors is hosted by Spotify and also available on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and Stitcher. So kick back and get a taste of my Florida. This week's episode of Catch Outdoors is number 104, titled End of Season. Two meanings for that. We'll get to that in a minute, though. First, some news, a review, and fishing reports. Plural. Yeah. It's a good week. Let's see, on October 14th, I'll be an instructor at Ladies Let's Go Fishing, held at the Elks Lodge in Tavernier. Yep, I've done this event in Naples and Fort Myers, and glad to be asked to help out at this one in the Keys. Ladies, if you haven't heard about this fantastic event that teaches ladies how to outfish men, then sign up. It's worth it. The 3-day event has class time, fun time. There's even fishing trips planned on Sunday. So go, get with it. Information, ladiesletsgofishing.com. At Everglades National Park, the all-new 24-unit Flamingo Lodge, including studios and 1- and 2-bedroom suites with kitchenettes and balconies overlooking Florida Bay, opens November 1st for guests. Wow. I don't know how many years it's been since it went away. Gosh, I'm not even sure what hurricane did it in now. Thinking back, it's 10, 12 years, long time. Anyway, it's getting there, and it's really cool. You can actually do your reservations now, even though it opens up in November. And I would advise that to do them as soon as possible. Rates range from $259 to $399 a night, plus tax, through May 2024, with a 14-day maximum stay. An adjacent standalone restaurant is slated to open along with the lodge. It's pretty cool. The park's full. I was there. That's why I'm saying this. I was actually there and able to walk through during construction. So it's an amazing place. Park's fully renovated Pink Guy Bradley Visitor Center with interactive nature and art exhibits and expansive views overlooking Florida Bay is now open daily from 8 to 5. Florida National Parks Association bookstore is in the center with books and Everglades souvenirs. The 2,400 square mile park is continental United States' third largest national park. Visit FlamingoEverglades.com. Reservations 855-708-2207. You can also obviously do that online. Yeah, I was there. We were there during the anniversary. I think it was the 75th anniversary of the national park, of the Everglades National Park. And they were in construction at the time, put on our hard hats and got to walk the place. And I got to tell you what, I was duly impressed. It's going to be full. It might be full now, for all I know. This has been out in the news for about 10 days now. So if you're serious about it, it's basically you get to stay in what I would call a pretty nice hotel in the middle of nowhere. And there's nothing better than that, quite frankly, in my opinion. New Key West Marina, Happy Landings Marina, is to open this fall for 75 vessels up to 40 feet in length. The marina is to feature gated 24-hour access, dock and concierge services, a fish cleaning station, ice machines, and parking. 30 boat lifts are initially planned, with capability to hoist boats up to 20,000 pounds. Future plans include up to 38 additional boat lifts, an office clubhouse with climate-controlled locker storage, and 2 rental apartments in late 24. It's on North Roosevelt Boulevard. Visit happylandingsmarina.com. Pretty cool. They do need more boat slips in Key West. I promise you that one, especially during season. Let's see. Take Stock in Children Backcountry Challenge takes place September 22nd through 24th. This annual tournament in Key Largo offers anglers the opportunity to win coveted trophies for trout, snook, and redfish. Fishing is allowed around the clock from Friday night through Sunday afternoon. A popular weekend auction showcase and Sunday evening dinner are open to the public. Proceeds support local vocational scholarships for all ages and Take Stock in Children scholarships for financially challenged Upper Keys students. Special note about closings for the month of September in the Florida Keys. Yes, indeed. I mentioned this in last week's podcast. So, if you want to check out the known restaurants, you can go there. Go back to my other podcast. But just so you know, many, many places are closed right now, restaurant-wise, throughout the Florida Keys. I found that Marathon's got a bunch. Big Pine, all of them have. Somebody is closed during this month. Renovations, cleanups, painting, stuff like that. They just take the month off, close the restaurant. So it's traditional, and it actually was traditional in other places in Florida. I know at Fort Myers Beach it was when I was there, and Sanibel did it too, but those have since changed their minds about it because of population and people visiting in the dead of summer. But in the Keys, nope, don't do it. So anyway, there's a list out there. You can also go online. Before I get into the title of this podcast, I want to mention something really fun to do in the Upper Keys. Jonelle is writing an article about the history of diving museum located in Islamorada, and she invited me along so she could go scope it out, get notes, and do that kind of stuff. And I've never been. Yes, oddly enough, it's right next door to Ziggy and Mad Dog's restaurant, which has become my favorite eatery. Yeah, it's literally shares a parking lot. It's right across the parking lot from it. What a fantastic, fun time. I figure I better go, since Key Largo is considered the scuba diving capital of the world, thanks to the many diving locations located close by. Have we got diving locations. If you want to go diving, come to Key Largo. There are just dozens and dozens of boats available. Obviously, Pinnacamp Park is available, and they have all kinds of boats going out for snorkeling and diving trips. So anyway, let me say this is really a cool museum. It has an extensive array of exhibits of everything diving from the very beginning, 4,000 years ago, when people were putting basically no more than a bucket over their head, to go underwater to breathe air, and pop out, look around, pop their head back in and get a breath of air in the bucket sort of thing. But it was really fascinating, and it goes from that all the way up to modern scuba diving and to exploration of the undersea world, which pretty neat. You start out with like breath hold diving, and then it comes to what I call improbable machines, and I believe that's what they titled it, ways to pump air through a hose to somebody underwater, origins of the helmet and how it was worn and why. And then they go into a whole South Florida connection with homemade diving stuff and homemade equipment. Eventually it gets into photography and movies and how underwater movies were shot back in the 30s, 40s, 50s. Remember Tarzan, that kind of stuff? Yeah, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. All that's included in there. It's really amazing. And there's a huge display of diving helmets from all over the world, the way that they advanced to eventually to the military Mark V, which is considered one of the finest underwater diving helmets ever made and highly collectible, by the way, I found out. And then, of course, into scuba, everything scuba. They did treasure diving. They did diving bells and how they work. There's a huge biology lab type thing telling you about the biology of underseas. And then last but not least, they have added a really cool feature called Aquanauts to Astronauts. And what that is what's been going on between Cape Canaveral, NASA, and the undersea world and the undersea explorers. And for those of you that don't know, I've been in Florida almost all my life, all through the astronaut stage and all through the launching of Mercury rockets and eventually to the moon. The guys, before they go into space, do most of the maneuvers and things. They train for outer space underwater because it kind of has the same feel to it. If you put pressure against something, you get pushed away, that kind of thing. And so this combo study's going on. They had a very large area set up to show you the differences between the outer space people and the underwater people, and also make a big point that underwater is nowhere near as explored as outer space is, which is true, at least our near outer space, not the far outer space, but it really is remarkable how little we know about the undersea world. But this combo between astronauts and Aquanauts is really, really interesting. So highly recommend you stop by and check this place out. It's in Islamorada. It's right next to a Ziggy Mad Dog's restaurant. It's right before you get into the main part of town, and it's on the right-hand side of the road. It's on the bay side as you're headed south. There's also information online at www.divingmuseum.org. Fishing report. Yes, the fish are biting, finally. I'm guessing that the lower water temperatures are having a big thing to do with that. We finally got rain, everyday rain. Like it rained like crazy each afternoon for about 3 days in a row. And man, did that drop the water temperatures in Florida Bay. So early in the week, I got out on Monday. Weather was perfect, so I took the Mako out on the Atlantic. That's a 18-foot flats boat. And I wasn't the only one out there. That was what was so cool about it. You could just tell it was a mill pond, just calm as it can be. And so there were 3 other guys out there in flats boats sitting in 100 feet of water. I just thought that was all of us looking at each other like, yeah, man, this is it. So I got fish. I fished from 30 feet to 100 feet of water. Lots of fun. I used basically frozen shrimp pretty much. I had a chum bag out too, just to draw fish up. I had the chum bag frozen shrimp, bottom rigs also. So I floated some rigs back in the chum slick, picked up more yellowtail than I know what to do with. Grunts, porgies, strange fish I had never seen before. True. Actually, 2 different ones I had to come home and look up. And lots of parrotfish and odds and ends, just weird stuff off the bottom. But man, was it fun. It was just constant action from 7:30 when I put the first line down to 11:30. The breezes started to come up about 11-ish. So I thought, okay, I was tired anyway from reeling stuff up. I'm not complaining, and I ain't bragging. It was just great. It was just one of those days you wanted to be out there. Weather was perfect. Water was crystal clear. I could see down to 50 feet. That's when I started to lose vision of the bottom, was at 50 feet. So it was really special. And the bite was constant. And that's all that matters. On Saturday, I'm recording this on Sunday. On Saturday, my lovely wife Janelle joined me, and we did the backcountry thing. The weather was kind of weird on Saturday, about the only way I can describe it. Very cloudy in the morning, large rain showers all over the Atlantic and kind of around us. They weren't moving at all. The air was just basically stale, stagnant. It was sitting still, so these rain showers would pop up and stay where they were. So we decided that we were just going to stay within maybe 5 or 6 miles of home in the back and not go out in the ocean side. That's where most of the rain was. We did really well. We went to one of our hot spots that we like to go to. And like I said, the water temperature has obviously made a difference. A couple weeks ago, I couldn't get hardly a fish out of this location. This time out, we landed more trout than we can possibly imagine. It was great. I completely lost count on sea trout. Also a snapper and a bunch of little cudas and a medium-sized cuda. And I lost what I believe was a really good one. Just the usual cuda stuff, snap you off. Yeah, that's how it works. But caught them all on Arties using Gulp. Yeah, you guessed it, the swimming mullet in white on Z-Man jigs, this time with red eyes. Bite was constant between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m., and then it just shut down. So all that happened in an hour. Yeah, well, and the weather started to get weird. And so we decided that, okay, we've had enough. Let's head back in that direction. We stopped for a little bit more fishing, but after that, it was more like, let's just get the heck out of here before this just pours down rain on us. And it did. But we beat it home. So, but again, the water temperatures are definitely lowered quite a bit. My fancy Simrad died. I was online looking it up, and people go, yeah, there's some problems with that. I'm thinking, oh, great, just what I need to hear. I just got it in March. So I'm going to do a little investigation on that today to see what's up. I sure am glad I've learned my way around Florida Bay, because I didn't have it, which is why I can't tell you what the water temperature was. I know by sticking my hand in it was cooler. Yeah, so that was a little disappointing on a new unit like that. But anyway, the nice thing is that if you couldn't navigate and that happened to you, you'd be up the creek without a paddle, or up the bay without a paddle. No pun intended. But anyway, we had a good time. Still storm watching. It's pretty crazy out in the Atlantic right now, but as I mentioned last week, we're blessed with a jet stream that's dropped down over the lower U.S. That causes most storms to turn and go north. And so far, so good. We're past the peak day of September. Now we just need to ride out the rest of September, a little bit of October to get this behind us, and that would be really wonderful. No hurricanes on hurricane season for us is a wonderful thing. Oh, yes. What I know about fishing Southwest Florida, Bridge to Paradise, and Take a Kid Fishing, all books by author my own self. and are available on Amazon Books and Kindle. You can also order them directly from my website at Catch You Outdoors. Those copies will arrive signed by me. The number of copies are definitely dwindling, so get your copy soon. I doubt I'll be reordering hard copies after this. I don't see that in the future. And yes, there's a book in the works. And yes, it's coming along. So hang in there. And now for episode 103, end of season. Yeah, y'all waited, haven't you? Hey, I had a lot to tell you. It was a busy week. The meaning of the title, as I said, is actually twofold. End of season, meaning that this is actually the end of season number 2 for Catch Outdoors. This is the final episode of season 2. Next season will be season 3. It's hard for me to believe. It kicks off on September the 26th, and I got a special show lined up in my mind. Yeah, I haven't written it all out yet, but I'll work on it this week. But I got some fun stuff I think I'm going to throw out there and probably do a little reminiscing, if you don't mind. The second part of end of season is pretty much what's happening around here and other parts of Florida. I mentioned this last week in reference to short closings in restaurants, store closings in restaurants, things like that. Seasons are different in different parts of Florida, but down here, September is quiet. And I remember on the West Coast in Fort Myers area, September was quiet. And then leading into October, it was still quiet, but people didn't talk about that much. And then, of course, November and Thanksgiving comes along, and everything starts to pick up rather suddenly. Upper reaches of Florida are still seeing tourists as winter moves in. Disney is quiet. Why? School's in session. And it'll stay that way until, again, Thanksgiving. I remember we went up to Disney at Christmas. Ooh, that was a mistake. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it, but I'm not a crowd person. That was ridiculous. They had to close the gates at Disney. They literally closed the gates. They couldn't let any more people into it. And if you've been to Disney and you know the size of Disney, that alone would amaze you that they had to close the gates and not let anybody in. So that's when it picks up. Right now is a great time to go to Disney. Go to Disney in August, September, October. It's pretty quiet, especially September and October because the kids are back in school. So it eliminates families pretty much. So it's mostly couples, young people, old people, that kind of thing. So if you want to get Disney in, get it that way. Fort Myers, Sanibel, Captiva, and Fort Myers Beach are pretty quiet, not only because of the hurricane and recovering from Ian, which of course they still are. They've made a lot of progress, I will say that. It's been a year, and it still looks like a hurricane area. I'm not going to kid you. There's a lot of stuff going on. You get back into Fort Myers proper or back in off of like 41, things definitely look better. Head south down to Naples are fine. I feel bad for the people of Fort Myers Beach. I realize that the vacationers and people that would actually come in September are not going to be there just because of facilities and places to stay. But I know many people are trying to come because I see a lot of posts about, I would like to go to Sanibel and I'd like to get to Captiva. So check it out. If you can get out there, great. If you can find a place to stay, that's great. But I want you to know there's still issues, and there will be for quite some time, especially along the Sanibel beaches facing out toward the Gulf of Mexico. The lower East Coast from Palm Beach County south to Miami is usually happening all the time. When living there, we experienced that kind of firsthand. The only noticeable slower time was when school was in session. Not on the roads, though. That was a double-edged sword. Let me tell you, school starts, okay? So everybody goes, oh, wow, got beach time now. We can go. There's not going to be any kids out. The families they're working, whatever. And but then the problem was going to school in the morning, the roads were jammed. And the roads were jammed again from 3 to 5 o'clock in the evening because of getting kids back home. And it's a big city. These are big cities. When you start to go south of Palm Beach County and you go into the lower areas of this place, it's very noticeable how incredibly crowded this area is. And it stays that way. It doesn't change much. But I'd have to say if you're going to an event there or you're going to do restaurants or you want to come and stay for a week at the beach, say in Fort Lauderdale on up toward Palm Beach County or down in Miami, it's a good time. I mean, you're not going to have the usual crowds that you get, and it's certainly not like in the wintertime when things really ramp up, or spring break when it's just downright. Spring break, we all hide in that area. It was like, man, forget this. We don't want to be a part of that. It's kind of nuts. But right now, not too bad a time. So they do have seasonal changes there, just not quite as noticeable as other places because it's big cities, and there's a whole row of big cities right there. And back to the Keys. Quiet now, noticeably quiet. September through early November are pretty laid back down here. When things ramp up as Christmas approaches and winter begins in earnest up north, well, then it's going to happen down here. So about the only big thing coming up is Fantasy Fest, which is at the end of October, celebrated around Halloween. Yeah, Halloween. I almost said Thanksgiving. And then there's also going to be a rather large Parrot Head gathering happening down in Key West the first weekend of November, if I'm not mistaken, around the 4th through 8th, somewhere in there. But that's not the usual. That's not MOTM. Meeting of the Minds, the Parrot Head bunch, that's the big one. That's going to be in Alabama this year. They had already decided not to do Key West before Jimmy Buffett passed away. The hotel that they stationed themselves out of was being renovated. Plus prices have gotten high, and a lot of people were a little put off by the distance and travel. So Alabama was chosen, the beaches of Alabama, down at, I believe that's Gulf Shores, I think that's what you call the area. So that's where they're all headed. But the next big event in Key West is going to be around Fantasy Fest. Key West is always hopping. I'm not going to kid you. You can come down here in what we quietly call the off season, which would be August, September, and you're still going to run into crowds of people in the Key West, especially on weekends. It is the place to be in the Florida Keys, plain and simple. You're not going to avoid it. But if you go, have a good time. People are congenial, they're fun, lots of music, lots of drinking, lots of eating, it's one great big giant party. And people like it that way. So there you go. Down here, all of the Keys down here, from Key Largo south, the seasons seem to not only revolve around the weather, but around fishing. So that is a big, big draw. I'd say it's probably one of the largest draws to the area. I joked about this before when I did an earlier podcast, and I said, if you need something here, you're going to have to drive to Homestead to get it. If there's something in particular that you're hunting for that's not a real common item, well, yeah, actually it can be common. You might wind up going to Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart / Target up in Homestead to get it from Key Largo. And if you're down south, there's a Home Depot in Marathon, and there's one in Key West. So that's the only big stores we have other than the Publix and a Winn-Dixie. So you travel out to get things. Fishing? There's a fishing shop every 4 or 5 miles. You can get all the fishing gear you could ever want, rods, reels, equipment. And then if there's not a fishing place, there's a boating place. There's boat dealers everywhere up and down the Florida Keys. Trailers, trailer repair, anything you can think of. There's no reason to leave the Keys. So fishing's a pretty big deal, and boating with it is a very big deal. And I'd have to say that's very, very seasonal, depending on what fish are running when. Right now, we're coming up on winter time, and in the winter, it's known that sailfish move in. Sailfish like the water cooler. They like it choppy. They like those nasty north winds when they come in from the fronts that will eventually reach the Keys. I'm waiting for that to happen. And they get very active. So there's this season where people actually come down to put sailfish on the list, get it off their bucket list. Dolphin, the same thing. Dolphin run really, really hard all early summer. Actually, they're running great right now, which is kind of odd, but people are getting great dolphin catches offshore right now. Really great dolphin catches offshore. So, but people tend to gear themselves to these fish. Tarpon. I mean, obviously, late March, April, May, that's the big tarpon time down here. Now, of course, you can catch tarpon year-round if you know where to look for them, but that's the focus is those migrating tarpon that are moving from spot to spot. And so that's a big time. So I wanted to bring that up because the seasons there have really nothing to do with, well, it has something to do with weather, cool weather versus warm, hot, rainy, not rainy, that kind of stuff. But ultimately, fish decide everything for a lot of people that come down here. You would not believe the amount of boats we see being towed into the Florida Keys on a Friday late or Saturday morning early and towed out on a Sunday afternoon late. It is absolutely amazing how many boats come and go out of here to go fishing from near Florida. The tags are mostly Florida tags. They're coming from as far away as the West Coast. How do I know it's a West Coast boat without looking at the tag? The bottom of the boat has got that orangey color on it from mangroves. Yeah, people that are listening to this that live on the west coast of Florida, you know what I'm talking about. Your boat, if it sits in the water for any length of time, doesn't have to be kept in the water, just in the water. You get that lovely little orangey yellow stain all the way around the bottom from the mangrove roots. Yep, you'll see those boats down here and immediately go, oh, there's a west coaster. He's down here fishing. Good for him. I hope he catches a lot. So the big seasons for fishing revolve around dolphin, mahi-mahi, for those that think I'm talking about flipper, grouper, snapper, tarpon, bonefish, sailfish, and others. You can throw permit into that, but that's kind of it. Like, for example, snapper, when the water warms in the late summer, and I'm going to call it July, August, the big snapper come in and sit out in the Atlantic on the drop-off from 50 feet to 100 feet. It's a great place to get really big mangroves, muttons, yellowtail, stuff like that, spawning season. So these things all coincide with what's going on out there when it comes to fishing. So I always like to throw that in there. So yes, we have these amazing seasons, but most of the time the seasons revolve around weather, except in the Florida Keys. And they revolve around fishing, a lot of fishing. The weather has been a little suspect, speaking of weather, and I hope to get back out there this week. I got to get my Simrad fixed to make sure I can figure out where the heck I'm going. Otherwise, I got to go to the known places again. I can't do much exploring without some kind of a GPS, at least to start out with. Although I've made it a good, 25, 26 miles up into the backcountry so far. So, I mean, it's not like I don't know. Well, pieces are coming together. I'm running into the places now that I fished in the 90s with Jonelle. So the areas above Alamorada, which we know pretty much like the back of our hands. So I'm starting to run into that. So eventually I hope to join the entire Florida Bay together into one big piece so I can go and explore it on a day, go from one end to the other and back again. Bring a little extra fuel, but it'll be fun to do. But anyway, the weather is getting a little weird around here right now. It's soupy. We have a cold front coming down that's not going to make it, but it squeezes the weather when it gets down this way. And I've got guests coming in. My best friend Gary's going to show up here at the end of the month, and then I got a couple of gals coming in October to November, and I cannot wait to get out fishing with all these people. So we'll keep you posted. And like I said, next week is going to be season number 3, and hope to bring you something special. Thanks much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell a friend, leave a review. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. The Facebook page is Catch Outdoors. Website, catchoutdoors.com, where you can find all the previous podcasts and a schedule of what's to come. Until next week, get outdoors and enjoy.